Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video for you. So today we're going to be looking at our Adamancipator deck once again. I'm still rocking the 60 card variant here because I'm still on my kick of jamming that Grasslook screener in just about every single deck that can reasonably accommodate it. I've been thinking about doing like a 60 card branded Despia variant, actually, but then I want Shadal's stuff for it, and well, anyway, we'll get into that when and if we get into that. But as far as this deck goes for Adamancipators, this deck is actually a shining example, I think, of how representation affects a deck's place in the meta. Just from what I've been glancing at as far as, like, you know, what is in the meta and what is currently meta. By the way, do be on the lookout in the next couple of days. I should be coming out with another meta update, so, you know, we're going to be looking at what decks hit Diamond and all that. And there's been a sharp increase in Adamancipator since the No Spell ritual, the No Spell Festival. And I think that was when people remembered, like, oh yeah, Adamancipator is really good, not just for this festival, but in general. Before that, Adamancipator was kind of like forgotten. But, you know, lest we forget that nothing has really changed about this deck as far as its power level, as far as what's in it, as far as, like, new tech for it. There hasn't really been any new recent additions that suddenly make this deck good. It is, of course, as always as ever, representation matters. And in the meta, the way that it matters is that, you know, if people aren't playing a deck, it doesn't matter how powerful it is. It's not going to be in the meta. In that regard, there is definitely potential for a lot of sleepers in the meta. Sleepers being decks that, like, you know, no one's really picked up on or paying attention to that can actually have a pretty decent spot. Adamancipator right now is looking like it could be even a tier 3 deck, but again, we'll jump more into that when we talk about, like, decks' current power levels and tier lists in a couple of days. And before we talk a little bit more about this deck, I just want to real quick remind everybody that I did launch my Patreon very recently. If you feel like getting some extra Master Duel content, I do post there every single day on the Patreon, so you do get more daily content. You know, that will include previews for upcoming videos, exclusive duels to the Patreon, Q&As, and a whole bunch of other fun stuff. Also, it definitely helps to support the channel, and in the long term, I'd like to devote as much time to the channel as possible, so your contributions there help with that and are very much greatly appreciated. Anyway, so talking about Adamancipator here, I haven't really changed like a whole lot with the build. I did mention this before when we were going over all our decks, but I did include the Buster Lock once again with the Union Carrier. I figured, you know, I spent the Ultra Craft points on these, I might as well play them, right? And honestly, I didn't put it in the first variant because I was like, oh, what if I mill the Buster Destruction Sword with the, Grasslook screener? But then, you know what, I thought about it and I was like, it's not really that big a deal if I do. Like, even thinking back to, like, Dragon Links, right? When we play 60 cards in Dragon Links and we mill Boot Sector Launch and or Dragon Ravine, it's not really that big of a deal to do so. So, I don't think it's a big deal at all to mill Buster Sword here. We definitely don't need to go into you know, the Dragon Buster Destruction Sword in order to make plays. And I've seen people in the past when I played Adamancipator ask, like, do you need the Destruction Sword and the Union Carrier in order to play this deck? And the answer is definitely no. You do not need these cards. If you don't have them, then I wouldn't worry too much about crafting them. If you don't have the extra points, it's more than playable without it. It's also just still good. The cool thing about Adamancipator, and I think I touched upon this during the festival too, is like, as far as ultra rares to craft this deck go, there's really not a whole lot here that aren't like staples, right? Like, you know, forgetting the Dragon Buster and the Union Carrier, which you could argue Union Carrier is a bit of a staple-ish card, although I don't play it in too many decks, but, like, you know, look at the Ultra Rares here. We got, like, Valor, Seas, Ash Blossoms, those are all staples. Snow, if you were playing a 40-card variant, you wouldn't run Snow. So, like, let's assume we're playing a 40-card variant, we're not running Snow or Grass, right? So our Ultras are Valor, Sea, Ash Blossom, Feathered Esther if you choose to run it, you don't need to. Foolish if you choose to run it, you don't need to, but it is really good in the deck. But you don't need to. Call Buys, Crossout Designators, Imperms, those are all staples. Even looking at the extra deck here, Borreload's a staple. Dragite is for this archetype, but like if you're playing Sword Soul Tenyi, you probably already have this card anyway, so, and even if you don't, you can also use this card in Sword Soul Tenyi. And any deck that can make level 8s and puts water monsters in the graveyard, really, I would argue this is a relatively staple-ish synchro monster. You know, Baron, Sword Soul, yeah, like, you know, look at the extra cards even too. IP Masquerena, Unicorn Appaloosa, access code, and Underworld Goddess if you choose to run it. These are all like what I would consider staple cards, so there's not really any crafting commitment to making this deck, even if again you want to try the 40 card variant. And then if you do have a set of grasses and a Fairy Tale Snow, you can go for the 60 card variant as well. So that's another really cool thing about Adamancipator, is that it's a very budget friendly deck, assuming that you're have already used your ultra rares to make staples, which is, I think, the first thing you should do when you're making ultra rares. I'm thinking about making an updated craft guide where I talk about like not just how to spend craft points wisely, but like the order I think a starting player should spend their ultra rare craft points. Let me know in the comments if that's a video you'd be interested in seeing. I would definitely be down to post that here on the channel. But yeah, I don't know. This deck is a lot of fun. There's not really a whole lot else to say about it. I'm still getting used to Small World. This is the first Small World deck I've ever played, and I've never resolved this card before playing this deck, so there've been a few hiccups as far as that goes, but it's actually not been too bad. It's been a lot of fun, actually. Like I said, I really like this deck, and again, people slept on it for a really long time. There are a lot of decks out there, by the way, that people were sleeping on, not just Adamancipator. I've rambled on about Adventure Phantom Knights and Tri-Brigade. Those decks are definitely both getting slept on. I think they're about as powerful as Adamancipator is, which again, Adamancipator I'd put in like upper rogue, lower tier 3 at the moment. So yeah, definitely, like I said, one of quite a few sleepers out there. In any case, let's go ahead and finally break this list down card by card, and then we'll take a look at those games. We are playing one PSY Frame Driver, one Effect Veiler, one Dragon Buster Destruction Sword, 3 Maxx, 2 PSY Framegear Gamma, 3 Doki Doki, 1 Prank-Kids Dropsies, 3 Adamancipator Seeker, 3 Adamancipator Researcher, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 Gigantes, 3 Koa'ki Mirror Guardian, 1 Revival Golem, 2 Tackle Crusader, 1 Fairy Tale Snow, 3 Prank-Kids Rocksies, 2 Adamancipator Analyzer, 3 Koa'ki Mirror Supplier, 3 Rock Band Xenoguitar, 3 Block Dragon, 2 Nibiru the Primal Being, 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, 1 Foolish Burial, 3 That Grass Looks Greener, 1 Miracle Rupture, 3 Small World, 2 Called by the Grave, 1 Crossout Designator, and 2 Infinite Impermanence. Extra deck is going to be 1 Herald of the Arclight, 1 Adamancipator Risen Raptite, 1 Borreload Savage Dragon, 1 Adamancipator Risen Dragite, 1 Baronne de Fleur, 1 Sword Soul Supreme Sovereign Chengying, 1 Gallant Granite, 1 Prank-Kids Meow-Meow-Mu, 1 Prank-Kids Doodle-Doodle-Doo, 1 IP Masquerena, 1 Union Carrier, 1 Nightmare Unicorn, 1 Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess, 1 Access Code Talker, and then finally 1 Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. Gonna round out the list there with that. Now let's take a look at some games. So my opponent is, I was looking at their list just now, they're playing a very interesting 60 card Phantom Knight deck. It's not leaning nearly as heavily into the Burning Abyss stuff as I did. It's got a lot of other interesting engines. I was just like spending a moment kind of just admiring it before we got into the game here. This is actually, unfortunately not going to get to see too much of my opponent's deck in action, because this first game here is going to show like a standard opening game, or like a really good opening hand rather, going first here, where we're going to end on like all the negates in the world and even a Buster Lock as well. So as you can see, I led off with the Prank-Kids Rocksies there. Prank-Kids Rocksies is actually one of the best cards in this deck to start with. It might have seemed kind of random that they put Prank-Kids Rocksies to 2 to hit this deck, especially when that first Master Duel ban list came out that had all those cards semi-limited. But it makes a lot of sense. It honestly does, because Prank-Kids Rocksies, like I said, is one of the best starters you can get. Like, Rocksies plus Supplier is a full combo. Opening with Adamancipator monsters is really nice, but it's not needed. Again, as long as you open Rocksies and really any level 4 extender, any Rocksies plus any level 4 monster you can get onto the board without having to normal summon it, that's a full combo right there, into a whole bunch of negates and a Buster Lock setup. So we have like that combo plus. We like the easy version of that combo because, again, we just had so much other gas in our hand. And even if our opponent had like a response or something, we also have the Crossout Designator here as well. One of the nice things about playing 60 cards is that you get to play a whole variant of disruption, not only to use yourself, but also to Crossout Designate as well. So like, I've got Veiler and, I mean, I usually try to put Veiler and Impermanent as many decks as possible anyway, but we got multiple Nibirus, so we can like cross out a Nibiru and still have one if we need it. Like, we're good to go with Crossout as far as that goes. And as far as this combo goes, we're shoring up towards the end here. We've already got the Appaloosa on board. Borreload Savage Dragon is coming down. I'm just going to use everything on board here to make a level 10. And it's funny, we actually whiffed on one of our mills, but if we hadn't, and also I think maybe if I had used my materials a little bit more wisely, I could have potentially ended on IP Masquerena, as well as everything else we're going to see here. Because I'm going to throw out the Block Dragon as well. No, but if I definitely hadn't whiffed on that, I could have ended on... Basically, the only thing I would have done differently is, like, you know, I would have summoned Block Dragon here and had my random monster I'd excavated from the other Adamancipator monster. Then I could have sent that and the Block Dragon to make the IP Masquerade here, and then I just would have, you know, used 3 more Earths to bring back the Block Dragon once more. So that would be a quote-unquote full setup, is to have the IP into Nightmare Unicorn, and although to be fair, I don't have any cards in hand, in addition to everything else I've got on board, which as you can see here is an Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess with 3 negates. We've got a Baronne de Fleur, we've got a Borreload Savage Dragon, that not only has 2 Boreal counters of its own for an Omni Negate, but it's also equipped with the Dragon Buster Destruction Sword thanks to the Union Carrier. So with this, my opponent is not able to special summon from the extra deck. So I have, again, just to recap, 2 Omni Negates, 3 Monster Effect Negates, and an extra deck lock. And I've got the Crossout Designator. And if my opponent answers my whole board, I've got Searches off Block Dragon anyway. So, pretty resilient setup here. Adamancipator is known for, like, it's kind of a more resilient, or like a rather... It's kind of a less resilient combo deck, rather. It's pretty susceptible to Maxx and Nibiru, potentially, if the Nibiru is timed right. But it's very susceptible to Maxx, so, you know, it's pretty easy to stop if they don't have something like Crossout Designator or Call By. But if there's nothing to stopping them, they can end on some pretty nasty boards. My opponent's going to start with the Reasoning right off the bat. I look over and I see, oh yeah, they're also playing a 60-card deck. Hello, fellow 60-card deck. So I guess I don't really have to worry about Grass here. Although, I guess to be fair, if my opponent had a Grass, he could still mill 10, which wouldn't be bad. But anyway, Reasoning, no, I definitely can't let that resolve. So I'm going to use my Baron in response. The opponent's going to respond with an E-Telly. I'm not going to use the Borreload in response to that. That's fine. This E-Telly definitely feels like a bait here. Where the Reasoning felt like a potential bait as well. The Reasoning felt like, okay, so the Reasoning felt more like a feeler than a bait. And what I mean by feeler is, I think my opponent has plays other than Reasoning in their hand. I think that because otherwise you would just fire off Reasoning right away. But I think they're trying to see if I would negate Reasoning or not. Because there are a lot of players, myself even on the right day, where I wouldn't negate this Reasoning with either of my negates here. I'd be like, well, let's see what they get, and then maybe I'll negate that. But the thing about Reasoning is, and by extension, Grass, if I wasn't playing a Grass deck, my opponent fired off it. Like, honestly, even if they had fired off Grass here, because again, we had a 10-card difference in our decks, that's still a lot of cards to mill, and I think I probably would have still negated that, just because, like, with Reasoning, it's not about what they hit, it's about what they mill. And I don't want them to mill, like, I think even like 5 cards would be too many, so I'd rather just stop that altogether. The E-Telly, on the other hand, is just pulling out one very specific monster from the deck. That I'm fine with, because if it resolves and that monster ends up being a problem, then I can just use Appaloosa to negate the monster effect. That's fine. The E-Telly isn't going to mill a bunch of cards, so I don't really care about that. The Reasoning, on the other hand, would. So yeah, they use the Zia means effect, and I'm just going to negate it with Appaloosa and not worry about it. They didn't special summon the Wielder and concede, as they must have realized that they didn't realistically have any plays at that point. Like, okay, so they could have gone for a Cherubni and milled something, but again, I just still have 2 Appaloosa negates and a Borreload negate. And lest we forget, they still can't special summon from the extra deck. That's like one of the main important things here, is like, with the Buster Lock online, there's no extra deck summoning happening. So, like, even if they were able to, push through all of my negates, which my opponent was doing a very good job trying to do that, by the way, they still wouldn't have been able to summon anything out. So ultimately, it is a futile fight, and as they realized that and then conceded. So yeah, that's going to be it for that one. Let's go into the next game. So this game is going to be against a 50 card Charmer deck. I say 50 because I don't know that I really know. Maybe there is a point that I'm not aware of, to be fair, but I'm not aware of any point to running a 50 card deck, but I could be mistaken. Charmers, though, interesting. I don't think I've ever played against Charmers before, but we're not even going to really see any Charmer cards, I think. It's mostly going to be their stun stuff. They're going to start by setting a couple of cards and flipping up Imperial Iron Wall. Imperial Iron Wall. So this definitely throws a couple of wrenches into my plans. I'm namely thinking, of course, of Block Dragon, but also Gigantes as well. But of course, mainly Block Dragon. So I won't be able to use Block Dragon in any of my plays, but that shouldn't be an issue here, I don't think. I'm going to use the Foolish Burial in order to set up a Revival Golem to, well, revive. Then I'm going to normal summon Prank-Kids Dropsies. My plan was to go for Prank-Kids, Prank-Kids Meow-Meow-Mu and then special the Rocksies for my deck. I, of course, wouldn't be able to use Roxy's effect if I tried to link it off because of Imperial Iron Wall, and also I wouldn't have a Prank-Kid to get out of the deck anyway, but I was mainly just trying to get an extra material on board before I went to my Gallant Granite, which I could have done a Xenoguitar to be fair, but the opponent's going to Solemn Judgment the Prank-Kids Dropsies, which I'm totally fine with. That is A-okay with me. I mean, it is going to mean the end of my plays here, but also, I know for my opponent's first turn, all they did was set 2 cards and pass, so the only card that really would make any difference here, or would, change the situation is whatever they top deck, which I don't think is going to be very likely to, given that my opponent had 3 cards in hand and weren't able to make plays with them. It seems like they're playing a much slower deck, and since they're playing a much slower deck like this, I think 1 card off the top is much less likely to make a difference as a result, which it doesn't. They just end up setting a card and then passing. So I'm going to go, I think I drew most of the Nibiru, yeah, so definitely like the most useless draw here, but it's fine. We can still make plays with what we had in hand. I'll normal summon that Xenoguitar, and then like I said, I want to go for Gallant Granite here. Now, I can't use Block Dragon, since obviously I can't banish stuff from Graveyard, and I don't have enough stuff in hand to banish, so I'm gonna actually search the Adamancipator Researcher here to get some plays going. I can special that because I control Rock Monster, and then I can start excavating, and I do manage to excavate some targets here. I'm going to get the Supplier. It would have been really nice to be able to get Doki Doki, but I didn't have anything in hand I could discard for anything meaningful. I didn't have like a level 2 or level 4 Rock Monster in order to get another Adamancipator monster out. So I'm going to go for the Supplier. That way I get the Guardian added to my hand, and then I can go into a Raptite. From there, I don't really hit too much of anything, just another Guardian, but it's fine because my opponent Solemn Judgmented. I just have lethal on board anyway, so kind of like, it's funny, kind of an anticlimactic game, because we had to play around our opponent's back row there, and Imperial Iron Wall might look like really devastating because like you can't block, because it's really easy to think like, oh, Iron Wall stops Block Dragon. Block Dragon is like what makes this deck good. If I can't play the card that makes this deck good, like, that's really bad, but it's fine. It's not that bad at all. We were not even held back. Like that hand, we were not held back by the fact that we couldn't Block Dragon. We were held back by a subpar hand against that deck, honestly. Like, looking here, we had the Maxx, the Gamma, and the Nibiru. Against a stun deck, literally none of these are going to be useful. There's the Guardian that we added. The Small World was like, we could have maybe made use of this, but like, it wouldn't have really, I don't think it would have made too much of a difference here. Well, no, we couldn't have, that's right. We can't activate Small World while Iron Wall's up because we can't banish cards. So that's actually another dead card. So like, looking at our hand, it was entirely dead cards except for like, again, those monsters that we used to make Gallant Granite. So that's what was holding us back again. Not the fact that Imperial Iron Wall was holding back Block Dragon. If we had a hand of like, any level 4 rock monster plus a Researcher plus like a Seeker, like, oh, we would have totally just gone off. In that regard, but anyway, it's fine. We managed to win either way, so let's just take a look at the next game. Wow, we managed to play against another 60-card deck. Just no 40-card matchups this play session apparently. This one's gonna be a like branded Shadal variant, which I was actually just talking about in the intro. Potentially want to get into. I'd have to craft windows and Shadal stuff. Shadal have a lot of ultra rares though, is the problem. Is what's mainly held me back from that. So. This hand's looking pretty good. Got a Miracle Rupture, Researcher, and a Block Dragon. So I'm going to Miracle Rupture for the Revival Golem and then special the Researcher to go for some plays here. Got a couple of call buys too, which is really, really nice. Now, unfortunately, we totally whiff on this Excavate, which really, really sucks. I'm going to go for the Raptite here, and I'm going to pretty much have to hope that something's gonna pan out here. I use the Raptite, and then my opponent fires off the Ash Blossom. Now, something I want to note about this is that up until this point, I actually hadn't gotten any prompts from my opponent at all. Like, yeah, how normally when you activate an effect that searches, like that Miracle Rupture, for example, normally when I activate that, if my opponent's toggle was set to auto, then they would have gotten a prompt to activate, and if they didn't want to activate, it would have passed back to me, right? But I didn't get that, so I was thinking this whole time, oh, my opponent doesn't have Ash Blossom, I'm good to go here. but my opponent actually had the toggle set to off and then turn it on at the moment they wanted to use Ash against this Raptite. Great moment to use it, by the way, because my Raptite, because I very clearly whiffed off the Researcher and am like, you know, kind of apparently desperately going into this not even apparently, I am desperately going into this Raptite and really hoping to hit some kind of excavate here. So this is a great moment to Ash Blossom. That was a very good play by my opponent. I have a call by, so it doesn't matter. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a great Ash Blossom for my opponent here. I just wanted to like point that out. Like, you know, sometimes I feel like I inadvertently, I never mean to, but sometimes I inadvertently kind of like bag on my opponent for misplays a little bit, which I don't mean to, again, because I make them all the time, and you know, it's only human to make misplays. Nobody plays perfectly, so I just like to take moments to also shout out when my opponent makes a very good play, and that was a very good Ash Blossom for my opponent. So we'll hit the Prank-Kids Rocksies here off the Raptite, which is a pretty good hit. That'll give us extra leak materials on board, as well as another, as well as of course the Rocksies itself. Now here I activated Small World, and then I don't know. Okay, I Small Worlded Block Dragon for Block Dragon. It was a total brain fart moment to even activate this card in the first place. I don't know if it's funny because I was just talking about misplays. I totally even forgot this was the game this happened, but like, I don't know if anyone else has this phenomenon where sometimes when you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Or any game really, your brain will just like shut off for like 3 seconds. Yeah, my brain shut off for 3 seconds and I activated Small World, and then as soon as I activated it, I could feel my brain's engines like booting back up, and then I was like, wait, what did I do? I wanted this Block Dragon. Shit. But I was actually able to just add another Block Dragon anyway, so don't mind this Small World. It is a total incidental non-play. I'm pretty much just throwing it out for no reason here. So, moving on to the regular line of play. We'll special the Block Dragon and go for Appaloosa. The searches are coming. My opponent knows that. I've got the negates on board, and they're just going to concede from there. So, I don't know. I just thought that was a funny game in terms of like one, I wanted to show off my opponent's Ash Blossom because I think it was very well timed. 2, I wanted to show off how we could actually come back from a seemingly hopeless position. Sometimes all it really does take is 1 excavate. And 3, I guess, I don't know, for some reason I thought it was funny to show off my Small World brain fart there. So we've got another game, let's go straight into it. Alright, now we're playing against Eldel Glitch, and this variant is running the Zombie World variant. So at the time of recording this, the Zombie Structure deck isn't quite out yet. I really hope that Structure deck has Zombie World. If it does, I'm totally down to play 60-card zombie decks. The fact that it has Unizombie is actually enough that I might be playing another 60-card deck anyway that features Unizombie. So, but if it features Zombie World too, then we can play at least one other 60-card deck. So, well, it would have to have Zombie World and Doom King Balderop, but neither of which were announced in the deck. I feel like they probably would be if they were in there. So, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed at this point. Anyway, we actually opened a really good opening hand against Eldel Glitch. I mean, not just against Eldel Glitch, like in general too. Opening with Ash Blossom, Imperm, and Feather Duster going second is very good. But especially against Eldel Glitch, we were able to Ash the Extravagance, and then obviously we tried to Feather Duster, but our opponent, fired off the Solemn Judgment in response. So that's actually still fine because I've still got my Infinite Impermanence here. And I'm going to throw this... Okay, I actually wanted to stop and talk about something real quick. I've mentioned this before when playing against stun decks about noting what order they set things. I'm a believer that that's actually an extremely important thing to pay attention to. So, let's look at the opponent's order of when they set stuff, right? They set middle, then left, then here, and then pass. I activated Feather Duster and they flipped up Solemn Judgment, which was the first card they set. I think that this card here is the one that they really want. I think this is an important floodgate, and I think this is probably something, maybe like a Conquistador, or maybe a Huaquero, or something like that, a little less important. The reason I suspect this is because I was a stun player for a long time in the TCG, and like, I don't know, I have noticed this phenomenon with stun players, because I used to set cards in the exact same order, where I'd go like Solemn or Starlight Road or whatever, then whatever Floodgate I really wanted to play, and then I'd just set stuff in whatever order. I would always set stuff in that order, and I noticed people tend to set things in that order too. So I'm specifically going to throw Imperm down in this column to try to hit whatever this is. Opponent's going to flip down the, or not flip down the, they're going to activate the Eldel Elixir of White Destiny and special summon an Eldel Glitch from their hand. Hit me for 2,500 and then pass, which is totally fine. You know, I don't really care about the Eldel Glitch. I managed to draw a grass off of the one Maxx draw and then a foolish draw for a turn. So those are honestly like probably literally the two best draws I could have gotten. Honestly, gonna fire off the grass, which does resolve. We got a Rock Band Xenoguitar in there, so I'll add back the Koa'ki Supplier. Even though I've got like Researchers and Seekers I could add, I'm gonna get those off the Block Dragon anyway, so I'm not really too worried about it. And then my opponent concedes, which does lead me to believe I really wish I could have gotten some kind of confirmation as to what my opponent's back row that I stopped with Imperm was. I really think it was the Floodgate. I did have a backup plan, by the way. If something went wrong or if I didn't hit the Floodgate, my plan was to special the Gigantes, run it into my opponent's Eldel Glitch, because Gigantes actually has an effect that when it's destroyed by battle, it heavy storms the field, it destroys all spell and trap cards. So I could have special Gigantes, run it into the Eldel Glitch, blown up the field, and then main phase 2 made plays. So I did, even if my Imperm little ploy didn't work out, I did actually have a backup plan there. So it wasn't all for naught. So, but yeah, fun little game against Eldel Glitch there where I actually managed to play through the back row instead of just like outright feather dustering all the face out cards there. So we have one more game to watch. Let's jump straight into it. So this last game is going to be against Branded Dragon Maid. And I will redeem myself as far as Small World goes here. If I recall correctly, this should be the game where I actually do successfully, or I guess to be fair, I successfully resolved Small World last time too, but you know what I mean. Unless I didn't keep that game, unless that was a different game. In any case, our opening hand is actually not that impressive here. I really racked my brain for, like, is there any way I could have summoned Koa'ki Supplier here? But no, the only way I could have pulled it off is if I had an Almirage in my extra deck somehow. And even then, I would have had Almirage plus Supplier, which I don't think does anything. So, I'm just going to set the Xenoguitar here, and then hope it survives, or hope I draw gas next turn. If it survives into the next turn, then I can just make a Gallant Granite and things are fine. But I also could have special summoned Block Dragon here, but I didn't have a way to send it to the graveyard. So here my opponent throws down a Branded Fusion, very scary, but they're actually going to go for Albion, and then they're going to send, what is this card here? The Stay Sailor Romaran, which is going to send a plant monster from their extra deck. I forgot to look at their extra deck to see what plant monster they were going to try to send here. But it's funny, even not knowing what they're going to send here, I'm like, okay, that's out of the ordinary enough that I'm just going to call by this Romaran. I don't like whatever it is they're planning, so I'm just going to stop it right here. This actually also has another side effect, by the way. Albion is really good because you can just like banish the materials you used for it anyway and get basically another free fusion. But here, I'm going to force my opponent into a scenario where they don't get a free fusion because I'm banishing the Romaran from the graveyard. They only have one material engraved, so now Albion's effect has to resolve, and they're going to have to use a material from either their hand or field. Now, I suspected, and they do end up just using Albion from the field in order to make Mirror Jade. I suspected they were probably going to do that, but it's still nice to get it out of the way. And here they actually use the Mirror Jade to banish the Xenoguitar, which is perfect because now I get to Foolish a Rock Monster, much better than just using it as a chump blocker. So, speaking of chump blockers, I debated whether I wanted to send Block Dragon for like an easier setup on the next turn, or just send Revival Golem to chump block the attack from the Mirror Jade. I decided to send the Revival Golem, which I'm really glad I did because my opponent's going to fire off a Maxx in response. So very cool. I'm definitely glad to get this Maxx out of the way, especially when they're only going to get one draw off of it. Regardless of, like, you know, because normally I'd only let them have one draw and then probably pass anyway, but to only give them one draw is totally fine with me. So drew a Researcher, that's cool. Normal Xenoguitar, and then my opponent activates Maxx. I talk about this a lot whenever this comes up, and I'm going to bring it up here as well. This was not correct for my opponent to Maxx here. They should have waited for me to, activate an effect. Now, it's like, you could say, like, well, they wouldn't have known you had Adamancipator Researcher in hand, and it's like, sure, they wouldn't have known that, but they could have known if they'd known Adamancipators as a deck well enough that I don't have any Link 1s or really like any inherent summoning, right? My special summons are all off of activated effects, so this is not a deck where you have to fire off Maxx when an opponent normal summons, because otherwise they're going to do what I did here and just move to end phase without getting any draws. They could have waited till I specialed Researcher in order to at least get one draw, but it does more than just give them one draw. A lot of the times, opponents or players, you know, when they're in a situation where they've specialed the Researcher and given them one draw, will have this thought process of, well, I've given them one, I might as well just play the combo out. I think I would have probably stopped anyway there, because Nibiru is a very real threat, and this deck definitely draws enough that it will consistently give your opponent Nibiru off of Maxx. So I would have stopped there, even though I could have potentially found lethal. Especially also because, oh no, actually the Miracle cannot use the effect, right? The Miracle can't use the effect this turn, but still, again, this deck, Adamancipator, will give my opponent enough draws that they will very likely find Nibiru, so I would have stopped there anyway. This is totally fine. I'm going to stop here, like I said, because now my opponent gets 0 draws. They just discarded the Maxx for no reason, so it's like a relatively minor thing, but it matters. I think it still very much matters. I also... I don't know why my opponent is necessarily like using the Mirror Jade. Well, obviously the first Xenoguitar is face down, they couldn't have known. But I really don't know why they banished this Xenoguitar and why they didn't add a Branded Red or set a Branded Red here. Like, when they banished the Xenoguitar and then added Brain Diffusion, my first thought was like, oh my god, it was relief. I was like, this is so fine. This is so incredibly fine. I don't care at all if they do that. That's so fine for me. I'm going to discard the Maxx here. In order to get the Earth in my graveyard, so that way I can just banish 3 Earths from grave for Block Dragon. Then I will special the Researcher and activate the effect here for a Rocksies. I can go for that. So at this point, you know, my opponent's already used 2 of their Maxx for very little effect. They drew 1 card between the 2 Cs, so I'm just going to pretty comfortably just start going off here. Dropping the Supplier as well as the Rocksies, but I think I got maybe a little bit too comfortable here as my opponent does actually have the Nibiru in their hand. And the thing is though, because I had Block Dragon to play, this Nibiru still doesn't like really matter. Oh, I also had Maxx, so I got 2 draws. These draws don't really matter because I'm just going to add Seeker anyway, and Valor doesn't do anything here, but yeah, I had the Block Dragon out, and that actually ended up acting as like Nibiru insurance, because I still hadn't even normal summoned yet. As you can see, I normal summoned that Researcher in order to be able to special summon the Seeker as well. I guess actually, to be fair, I should have normal summoned the Doki Doki, and then pitched that for the Analyzer, and then special the Seeker. Would have actually been the correct play, but whatever. Now I'll go for the Baronne de Fleur, of course, now that the Nibiru is gone, and then going for the Raptite to hit an Excavate off that. Even if I had whiffed this Excavate, I still could have brought the Block Dragon back, and let me actually see how many Earths I have engraved. I have 1, 2, 3 engraved, and I have 1, 2 in hand, so I could have brought the Block Dragon back once, unless I had gone for an Earth extra deck monster, which I don't think I could have. So, okay, so if I would have whiffed off the Raptite, I definitely would have had to thought a lot more. Okay, how do you like this Borreload with no Link monsters in the graveyard, by the way? I think this was a misclick. I'm pretty sure I actually did mean to click Dragite, but like, I'm so used to making Borreload in general when I sync for 8 that I just, you know, subconscious took over and went for the Borreload. It's not going to matter. It's going to be lethal anyway. All I needed was 3,000 attack points, but I thought that was kind of funny there. So yeah, I don't know, despite like, you know, so this wasn't the game where we redeemed ourselves a small world. I promise I did actually resolve a small world correctly. I guess I just lost that game and or just didn't keep it for whatever reason. No, I think that was a game where my opponent just conceded after I started comboing. Whatever, regardless, either way, you know, we ended up managing to win there, despite, you know, our opponent having multiple Maxxes and Nibiruing us anyway. So there is that one. Let's go to the outro now. Alright, everybody, I want to thank you very much for watching all the way to the very end like this. That does mean a lot to me personally, and is also a great way to support the channel. Other great ways to support the channel, like I mentioned towards the start of the video, the Patreon. Feel free to check out the link below for a whole bunch of extra daily content. And if you just, you know, again, want to help the channel become more, I guess, independent, so to speak. Also want to thank all of you who are, of course, commenting and subscribing. Comments, as always, ever let me know what you think of the build and games in the comments below. And just if you have any suggestions for the channel in general, I'm always looking for that feedback there. And yeah, if you subscribe, that will get you daily notifications of when these videos drop, which does happen every day here on the YouTube channel, as well as, again, Patreon. So on both those sites, I will be producing daily content there. But that's going to go ahead and do it for this one. That's all the time that I've got for today. So without further ado, this is HexLex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.